Hello, friends. Thanks for being here. You're very welcome. My name is Aisling, and I'm here today to talk about books. Specifically, I'm going to give you some of my winter book recommendations. So, it is a very kind of dreary December day here at headquarters, and it feels like the perfect day. So, without further ado, we're going to get into it. So, the first one that I'm going to mention is Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica O. Excuse me again for not knowing how to pronounce things. So, this is a short book. It's actually less than 100 pages, so it's more like a novella, if not like a long short story. So, a daughter travels to Japan with her mother, kind of in an attempt to build a connection with her mother. They have a very fraught relationship. They're very distant from each other, and the daughter is trying to kind of rekindle a bit of a connection between them as they're aging. So Japan is a foreign place to both of them, and it helps the daughter to think that maybe, okay, here we'll be on some equal footing. So our narrator, this daughter, kind of helps to impart this feeling of loneliness while in the midst of trying to understand herself and her mother and their relationship with each other. So it kind of deals with some interesting questions like how much of ourselves comes from our parents through biology alone, so that kind of nature and nurture debate, and what parts of ourselves have been shaped by the memories that our parents have shared with us, and also just what is it that really prevents us from communicating our inner selves to another person, specifically our parents sometimes. And I think that anybody who's ever tried and even failed to find some kind of common ground with somebody, particularly a parent, will find this one really interesting and will relate to it a bit more deeply. It's definitely a more literary book. There's nothing fantastical about it or anything like that. So just so you know where you stand with that. And then on the contrary, we do have a bit of a more fantastical, mythological, kind of fairy tale-esque recommendation. So my next recommendation is, of course, the Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. So this is the first book in the Winternight trilogy. So I'm actually reading the second one at the moment after a really long time. I recommended this book a couple of times before now. So we are in the Russian wilderness and we follow a family. So particularly our main protagonist, her name is Vasia, or I think Vasilisa is her given name. Herself and her family are living in this cabin with her parents, and things are going well. They have a nice life. They come inside in the winter and they tell stories around the fire. So they've grown up on these fairy tales told by Vasia's mother's wet nurse, and as harsh as it is, it seems quite idyllic. But this is all before Vasia is born. So Vasia's mum is very into the spirits and things that maybe aren't as accepted by some other people. And she really wishes for a child that's a bit more free spirited and that has a connection with these spirits as she does herself. So she wishes for this child, and unfortunately, she actually passes in childbirth, and so we have Vasia. So Vasia grows up to be everything that her mother wished for. She's incredibly willful, and is seen as quite strange by a lot of the villagers and people around. But anyway, long story short, Vasia's dad goes to the city to arrange a marriage for Vasia's older sister, and he kind of gets caught up in some political to do and ends up agreeing to marry this woman and brings her home. And this woman is really devout to different gods than the family would have grown up with, and she instills her views on the family. Vasias basically having none of it. They're not allowed to pay homage to the gods and the spirits that Vasia is used to worshipping, and Vasia is really worried because she can foresee a lot of bad things coming because the gods aren't being appeased and aren't being worshipped. She realizes that there's quite a lot more at stake here than anybody else realizes, and basically, as danger surrounds them, as a consequence of all of this, Vasia must really call upon the gifts that she's been told that she must suppress. by her stepmother and by the villagers and so on and so forth, but it's actually in an effort to protect herself and her loved ones. So she's kind of going against the grain a bit, and she's a really fun, interesting main character. She just knows what she likes and will do as she pleases and thinks nobody should be able to tell her what she should do. And I really enjoyed this one. It was one that I had heard nothing about before I actually picked it up, and it's been way too long, and I'm so happy to get into the second book in the series, which is The Girl in the Tower. So yes, that's a more fantastical recommendation. And then the next one also is a bit of a more fantasy-esque one, and this is a book that I picked up knowing very little about and was pretty much blown away by the story. It was something so new, and just I had never seen the film. I didn't know what it was about. I had no idea, and I thought it was just like a kid's book. The book in question, of course, is Northern Lights, which is part of the His Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman. This book was great. So we follow a girl named Lyra, and she is brought up in Oxford. So she's an orphan, and she is raised basically on, I think it was like a university campus. But what's really fun and unusual about this world is that in this world, everybody is attached to a demon. And you might think, demon, oh no, scary. But these are this lovely creatures that everybody's attached to, and they kind of can change form, and they follow their owners, we shall say, around, and it's all quite lovely. But something happens whereby Lyra's best friend goes missing, and she is determined to do everything within her power to find her friend and to bring him home. So she sets out on a quest to find out exactly what has happened to him. So this becomes such a far-reaching story. It really surprised me. It's so fantastical and magical, but it's also quite a lot darker than I was expecting for something that was, in my opinion, I thought beforehand going in that it was like a light, breezy children's story. Friends, it's not. It's a great read. It was a very rare 5-star read from me. I'd really recommend it. It was just so novel, so unusual, just unlike anything I've ever read before. And of course, being me, I haven't started the next book in the series yet, and I read this about 2 years ago now, so shame on me, right? My next recommendation then is for you romance lovers. So I have a bit of a whimsical read. My next one then is a book called A Castle in the Clouds, and it was written by Kirsten Gear. So I actually love this cover, isn't it so cute? I love the little ginger kitten. But so this one is definitely moving from the dark to the light-hearted. So it's set in a hotel in the Swiss Alps, which immediately when I heard that I was thinking The Shining. No, this is nothing like The Shining, don't worry. So we follow our protagonist Sophie, who is working as an intern in the hotel, and she is a high school dropout. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. She's just kind of toddling along, one foot behind the other, and is happy enough to do that for a little while. The story is set around the Christmas period and into New Year's as well, so it's one that actually can be read pretty much at the same pace as the story is being told, which is really nice. It's a great one to read between, say, Christmas and New Year's that week. It's silly, it's whimsical, there is a lovely little cat, there's romance, and there's also something just slightly Studio Ghibli about it, even though it's not necessarily a fantasy or in any way magical or fantastical. There's just something very whimsical about it. Sophie here is trying to keep the hotel running smoothly, but everything and anything goes wrong, and she gets herself caught up in a bit of a situation when problems keep arising. And soon Sophie finds herself in the middle of a perilous adventure. This one's just a lot of fun and definitely a recommendation if you're looking for something a bit more lighthearted and seasonal. So my next recommendation then is a book that I listened to on audio, and I didn't know what a treat I was in for. So the next book I'm going to speak about is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, and this one is another one that's definitely a fantasy. It's definitely quite mythological, quite folklore-esque. So we follow Miriam, and she is the daughter of a moneylender, but her dad, the moneylender, is not great at her job, and Her dad's inability to collect his debts has left the family in a really bad situation whereby they don't have money to eat, they don't have money to pay their bills, and they're basically on the edge of poverty, if not smack bang in the middle of it. So Miriam decides she's going to take things into her own hands, and she goes out and takes on her father's jobs, and actually it turns out she's really good at it and soon gains a reputation for being able to turn silver into gold. So when an ill-advised boast draws the attention of the king of the Starrick, so these are kind of grim fey creatures, very wintry, very icy, very stark, very not fun, very serious, very kind of scary people. Miriam's fate then and that of their two kingdoms kind of starts to diverge and will be forever altered. So she is set basically an impossible challenge by this nameless king. She unwittingly spins a web that draws in a peasant girl whose name is Wanda and the unhappy daughter of a local lord who plots to marry his children to the dashing young Tsar. But this Tsar, of course, is not what he seems, and the secret he hides basically threatens to consume the lands of humans and Starrick alike. Torn between deadly choices, Miriam and her two unlikely allies embark on a desperate quest that will take them to the limits of sacrifice, power, and love. So this channels really storytelling of myth. It's really multi-layered, it's multi-POV, it's one that I would absolutely return to as somebody who is not a rereader in general. Really enjoyed it, was very surprised by it. Definitely another recommend from me. And then next we have something a little bit different. So a book by Ottessa Moshfegh. So I have read My Year of Rest and Relaxation and it just wasn't for me, so I was really reluctant to pick up any of her other books, but I happened to get a hardback copy of Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh for I think €2, and it was on my shelves, so I decided to read it. So we follow our book's namesake Eileen. She is a 24-year-old young woman and she lives in New England, and this is kind of around the Christmas period that this book is set, and she works in a juvenile correctional facility for young boys, which Eileen basically always refers to as a prison. She lives alone with her alcoholic father and the atmosphere there is really toxic, and she feels as though the prison, the job, is something kind of really the only thing that she has going for her. She's absolutely obsessed with one of the prison guards who isn't really all that great, isn't all that nice to her, and she doesn't really have any friends. And things are looking pretty dreary for Eileen until Rebecca shows up. So Rebecca is the new prison counsellor and she's everything that Eileen isn't. So she's really bright, she's really smart, she's really cheery, she's a lot of fun, and Eileen is absolutely enchanted by this woman and does her best to become her friend, which she does succeed at. So this story is told from the much older Eileen's perspective, so we get a really great insight into the inner workings of Eileen's mind. I don't even know what to say here. Eileen is a difficult person. She's quite perverse. Her insights are unusual at the best of times. Don't be fooled. This is not a lovely literary story about friendship. It's really dark. It's quite disgusting. Eileen's quite deranged. Her logic doesn't add up a lot of the time. But what I found really great about it was that even though Eileen is not such a nice or likable character, there's something about some of her insights. I was like, yeah, I get that. I feel that way myself, which made me feel a certain type of way because I'm like, oh, I'm relating to this girl, and you don't want to relate to Eileen, let me tell you. But it kind of made me root for her quite a bit, which was great. This book is really typical Moshfegh in that it's entirely messed up. Don't say that I didn't warn you, but it's a great read. On to a book that's quite literary, quite lovely, which is a stark contrast to Eileen. But the book in question is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is a really, really short book. You will read this in one setting very easily. So we follow Bill Furlong, a local coalman in the run up to Christmas. And it's set in a small Irish town in the 80s. Fun fact, it's my hometown that it's actually set in. So I actually avoided this book for a really long time because it was too close to home. And I feel like such an idiot saying that because it was one of my favourite books of last year. So we follow this man, Bill, and he has a family of daughters. So I think 5 daughters and a wife, and he's really run ragged. So as I said, he's a local coal man. He has a business and he's constantly working, trying to keep his family fed and looked after. He ends up involved with the nuns and witnesses an episode of mistreatment which he struggles to walk away from. And that's the gist of the whole story. It's a really quiet story. It's very typical Claire Keegan in that it is really succinct. The language is really on the nose, but in this really wonderful way. There are no words spared here. Every word has its place in a Claire Keegan book. It is a really lovely book. It has a really lovely message, and it also brings to light something really important, which is the dark past that Ireland has. And it's a past that's only really catching up with us now, particularly to do with the Catholic Church. So while this isn't a true story, it is based around true events. The Magdalene laundries were a thing, and it's something that was really suppressed by the church in Ireland, which is really sad. Another fun fact is that there was a film actually shot of this book back in about March of this year. So as I said, it's set around Christmas. So in town there were like lots of lovely Christmas decorations, but really vintage ones like from the 80s. It was so nice. But Cillian Murphy is actually in that film, and I think it should be out next year. I'm really looking forward to that. Another short literary recommendation I have is The Ice Palace by Tar Vesias. I slaughtered that, I apologise. So this really lovely little short book tells the story of Sis and On, and they're 2 friends who really only have spent one evening outside of school together, but it really changed the course of their lives and it had such an impact on them. And then On suddenly disappears and they don't know what's going on, where to find her. Sis's world is completely shattered because of her disappearance. So it is a really short book, so I won't give much away, but this one definitely falls into the literary sphere. The writing is really lyrical and really beautiful. Again, it's one that you will read in one sitting, so yeah, I recommend picking it up. It's just one that really took me to another place, given its strangeness. It's not a bad strangeness, it's just really unusual. I really enjoyed it. And then my last recommendation is a book called The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna of the Nightingale fame. So this is a book that follows a teenage girl named Lenny, and Lenny's dad has come home from the Vietnam War and he's a changed man. He's really volatile since he came home, and he decides that he's going to uproot his family and they're all going to move to Alaska. So off they go in the middle of summer. So it's Lenny and her mom and her dad, and her parents' relationship is quite volatile and Lenny ends up caught up in that quite a bit. When they reach Alaska, it seems that all of their problems are solved. It seems really idyllic. They come across this community of people that are really strong and independent and really generous with their time and with their resources as well, and things are looking great until winter strikes and Lenny's dad's mood starts to really go downhill. Things start to become really dangerous in the home, and herself and her mom are essentially left alone with him because they're literally in the middle of nowhere in feet and feet of snow, homesteading it, and things are quite tough for them. So this book is at its heart a portrait of human resilience. I really enjoyed it. I didn't know what to expect from it. It's like the first audiobook that I ever listened to, but I just kept listening to it and I really enjoyed it. So the latter half of the book sort of starts to read a little bit like a thriller, but it's really compelling. It's really literary. The descriptions of the landscape are absolutely beautiful. I found it to be such a compulsive read and I really couldn't stop listening. So would definitely recommend that one as another quite literary read as well. So that's it, friends. There you have my recommendations of books that are quite wintry, set in winter, set around Christmas, a lot of them. Books that I did really enjoy. So let me know if you have any book recommendations for winter down in the comments below. I hope you have a really lovely week. I hope you're minding yourself, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you're up for it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in a video very, very soon. Bye bye.